Hey, deep divers, welcome back. Today, we're going to dive deep into a conspiracy theory that's been making the rounds online for decades.
Hmm.
Well, let's just say it's out of this world, literally. We're talking about Project Bluebeam.
Yeah, this one, it's really captured people's imaginations, hasn't it?
It has. And you guys have sent us a ton of articles and notes about it, so we're going to tackle it head on.
Mhm.
We're going to break down what it is, where it came from, and why it continues to fascinate and maybe even frighten people.
It's definitely a theory that gets under your skin, that's for sure.
So what exactly is Project Bluebeam? In a nutshell, for people who are hearing about this for the first time, what are we talking about here?
Well, it's this theory, a really detailed one actually, that claims that, well, get this, that there's this elaborate plan to stage a fake alien invasion.
A fake alien invasion.
Yep, you heard that right. And that it's all part of a bigger scheme to establish a new world order. We're talking about global control, a one world government, even a single world religion.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like a sci-fi movie, like something straight out of Hollywood.
It does, doesn't it? But what's fascinating is how much detail this theory goes into and how many people truly believe in it. It's been around for a while now, but it just won't go away.
Right, so it has some serious staying power.
Mm.
But where did this all begin? Who came up with this wild idea?
Well, it all traces back to the 1990s and a Canadian journalist named Serge Monast.
Okay, so Serge Monast, he's kind of the father of Project Bluebeam.
You could say that. He published a book in 1994 where he laid out this whole theory, claiming to have insider information. He pointed fingers at various organizations, even NASA, suggesting they were in on it.
So he was claiming he had some kind of inside scoop on this global conspiracy.
Right, and it really caught on with certain groups, people who already had that distrust of governments and authority figures.
So what you're saying is that even back then, there was already this kind of undercurrent of suspicion about what governments might be up to behind the scenes.
Exactly. And Monist, he tapped into that. He claimed that the powers that be, they were planning to use advanced technology like holography and mind control to basically trick the entire world into believing this alien invasion was real.
So a fake alien invasion, all done with smoke and mirrors, or rather, holograms and mind control.
Right. And the goal to create so much chaos and fear that people would willingly surrender their freedoms and accept this New World Order as the solution, for safety and security.
So basically, problem, reaction, solution, but on a global scale.
Exactly. And Modest, he didn't just throw out this idea, he actually broke it down into these four distinct stages that supposedly lead to this New World Order.
Okay, so let's hear it. What are these four stages of Project Bluebeam? What's supposed to happen according to this theory?
Well, the first stage, it's called staging the alien invasion. It involves using super advanced technology to project these incredibly realistic holographic images of alien spacecraft all over the world. Imagine massive UFOs appearing over major cities, causing widespread panic and fear.
Oh, wow. I mean, I can only imagine the chaos that would ensue if something like that were to happen.
Right, and that's exactly what the masterminds behind this plan are counting on, according to Monist. They want people to be terrified, to feel helpless.
It's like they're trying to create this mass psychological trauma to then
Right.
exploit.
You got it, and it's just the first step.
Okay, so stage one is all about scaring the living daylights out of everyone. What's next in this supposed master plan?
Well, stage two gets even more, well, let's just say interesting. It's called universal spiritual manifestation.
Okay, universal spiritual manifestation. That sounds almost, well, peaceful.
Well, on the surface, maybe. But the idea here is to use that same holographic technology, but this time to project images of religious figures. Think giant holographic images of Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, you name it, appearing in the sky.
So first they scare us with aliens, and then they try to unify us with religion. It's like a 1-2 punch of psychological manipulation.
Exactly. The theory goes that these holographic projections, they'd be tailored to different cultures and religions around the world, creating this illusion of a global spiritual awakening, this sense that we're all connected, that there's this one true faith that we all share.
It's like they're trying to create a global religion, a single belief system for everyone.
Right. And this, according to the theory, would pave the way for the next stage.
Okay, this is getting really intriguing. So 2 stages down, 2 to go. What's next on the agenda for Project Bluebeam?
Stage three is where things get really, well, creepy. It's called Electronic telepathic communication.
Electronic telepathic communication. Hold on, are we talking about mind control here, like actual mind control?
That's exactly what it sounds like. The theory suggests that they'd use some kind of advanced technology, maybe electromagnetic waves, maybe something else we haven't even discovered yet, to basically beam thoughts and emotions directly into people's minds.
Wow, that's some seriously scary stuff. I mean, we talk about the power of social media and algorithms,
Yeah.
but this is taking it to a whole new level.
No kidding. It's like taking all our anxieties about technology controlling us and amplifying it to the extreme.
So they scare us with fake aliens, then try to unite us with this holographic religion, and then they take control of our minds. What could possibly be left after that?
Well, the final stage, it's called universal supernatural events. This one gets a little vague, but it basically involves staging a bunch of weird and unexplainable events. Think like, I don't know, staged miracles, supernatural occurrences, maybe even making it look like the dead are coming back to life.
Okay, so they're basically trying to break down our sense of reality completely.
Right. The idea is to create so much confusion and disorientation that people are basically willing to believe anything, to follow anyone who seems to have some kind of authority or power.
So by the end of these 4 stages, the world's population is basically primed and ready to accept this new world order. They're terrified, confused, and desperate for some kind of stability.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to manufacture a global crisis of faith and then swoop in with the solution.
It's a pretty wild theory, no doubt about it. But the question is there any actual evidence to support any of this? Or is it just a really elaborate and well-structured work of fiction?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Welcome back, Deep Divers. So we've laid out the 4 stages of Project Bluebeam, this intricate plan to, well, basically pull the wool over the eyes of the entire world. But, let's be honest, it all sounds pretty far-fetched. Like, is there any actual evidence to support any of this? I mean, it's a good story, but is it anything more than that?
Yeah, that's the key question, isn't it? And that's where things get a little tricky. Because the evidence that proponents of this theory point to, it's often pretty circumstantial. Like they'll point to advancements in things like holography or, government research into things like mind control as proof that this plan is already in motion.
Right, because if those technologies exist, even in their early stages, it's not that hard to imagine them being used for nefarious purposes.
Yay.
It kind of fuels the imagination.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to look at these claims critically. For example, you mentioned HARP in your notes.
Yeah, HARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. That was a real thing, wasn't it? A real research facility.
It was, yeah. It was up in Alaska, funded by the U.S. government. And they were studying the ionosphere, which is this upper layer of the Earth's atmosphere. But conspiracy theorists, they latched onto HARP and claimed that it was capable of all sorts of crazy things.
Like what?
Oh, controlling the weather, triggering earthquakes, even manipulating people's minds. Basically, they claimed it was this super weapon disguised as a scientific research facility.
Right, so it fits that narrative of the government hiding its true intentions behind a veil of science.
Exactly. But, scientists who actually worked on HARP, they've repeatedly debunked these claims. The technology they were using, it just wasn't powerful enough to do any of the things that conspiracy theorists were claiming.
So another case of taking a real thing, a real research project, and twisting it to fit a narrative.
Right. But, even if HARP wasn't this secret mind control weapon, it's easy to see how people could get drawn into those kinds of ideas, especially when you consider the fact that governments have, in the past, experimented with things like mind control.
You're talking about things like MKUltra.
Yeah, MKUltra. That was a real CIA program back in the 50s and 60s, and they were doing some pretty shady stuff. They were experimenting with LSD, hypnosis, all sorts of techniques, trying to figure out how to control people's minds.
Wow. I mean, that's not exactly a secret anymore. It's well documented.
Right. But it definitely adds fuel to the fire for conspiracy theorists. Because if governments were doing that back then, who knows what they're capable of now, right? Especially with all the advancements in technology we've seen in recent decades.
Right. It kind of makes you wonder, what are they not telling us?
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be discerning, to think critically about the information we're consuming. Because just because something sounds plausible or fits into our existing worldview, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
So what you're saying is that we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions, about connecting the dots without really examining the evidence.
Right. And, in the case of Project Bluebeam, while some of the individual pieces might seem plausible, The overall narrative, the idea that there's this grand conspiracy to fake an alien invasion and establish a new world order, it just doesn't hold up to scrutiny.
I mean, think about the logistics of something like that. You'd have to have thousands, if not millions, of people involved, all keeping this massive secret. It just doesn't seem realistic.
Right. It's just not how the world works. Global conspiracies of that scale, they're incredibly difficult to pull off and even harder to keep secret.
So even if there are some shady things going on, some government projects that we don't know about, the likelihood of them all being part of this grand scheme to fake an alien invasion, it just seems really slim.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be critical of authority, that we shouldn't question things. It's just about finding that balance between healthy skepticism and, falling down the rabbit hole of conspiracy thinking.
That's a great point. It's about being informed, being critical, but also being aware of our own biases and tendencies.
Right. Because sometimes our desire to believe something, to find a simple explanation for a complex world, it can cloud our judgment.
So even if Project Bluebeam is just a theory, even if it's not actually happening, it can still teach us something about ourselves, about how we think and how we process information.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we're all susceptible to believing things that confirm our existing beliefs,
Wow.
that make us feel like we're in the know, that give us a sense of control in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable.
So what can we do about it? How can we be more discerning, more critical thinkers, especially when it comes to something like this, where the lines between fact and fiction can be so blurred?
Well, that's a topic for another deep dive.
Welcome back to the show, Deep Divers. So we've dug deep into Project Bluebeam, this theory about a fake alien invasion, all cooked up to usher in a new world order. We've talked about the supposed stages, the evidence, and even how it plays on our anxieties about technology. But, I keep coming back to this question. Why do people actually believe this stuff? Like, what's going on in our heads that makes these kind of conspiracy theories so appealing?
That's a really good question, and one that psychologists and sociologists have been grappling with for a long time. It's easy to dismiss people who believe in conspiracy theories as, gullible or misinformed, but it's often much more complicated than that.
Right, because I'm guessing there's not like a single conspiracy theory gene that makes some people more susceptible than others.
Exactly. There's a whole bunch of factors at play, both psychological and social, that contribute to why some people are more drawn to these kinds of beliefs.
So it's not just about a lack of education or critical thinking skills.
It's definitely not that simple. One of the big factors is this need for certainty and control. The world can feel pretty chaotic and unpredictable sometimes, right? And conspiracy theories, they offer this sense of order, this idea that even though things are bad, at least someone's in control, even if it's some shadowy group with nefarious intentions.
It's like finding a pattern in the chaos, even if that pattern is totally made up.
Exactly. And that can be really comforting for some people, especially in times of crisis or uncertainty. Like when things are feeling out of control in your own life, it can be tempting to latch onto a theory that explains the world in a simple, black and white way.
Right, because it's easier to believe that someone's pulling the strings than to accept that maybe things are just messy and complicated, and there's not always a clear explanation for why things happen.
Exactly. And Project Bluebeam, with its claims of this elaborate plan and hidden technology, it really plays into that need for control. It's like, even though we're being manipulated, at least we know who's doing it and why.
It's like having that secret knowledge, that insider perspective makes you feel like you're one step ahead, right?
Exactly. It's like being part of a select group that sees the world differently, that's not fooled by the mainstream narrative. And that can be really appealing, especially for people who feel alienated or marginalized in some way.
It's like finding your tribe, even if that tribe is built around a belief in something that might not be true.
Right. And that sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than yourself, it can be really powerful.
So it's not just about the theory itself, it's about the social connections that form around it.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why conspiracy theories can spread so quickly online. You find these communities, these echo chambers, where everyone reinforces each other's beliefs, and it becomes really hard to break out of that cycle.
Right, because if everyone around you is saying the same thing, it's easy to start believing it, even if there's not much evidence to support it.
Exactly. And then, you have this distrust of authority that often goes hand in hand with conspiracy thinking. People who are already skeptical of governments and institutions, they're more likely to believe in theories that paint those institutions in a negative light.
And Project Bluebeam definitely plays into that, right? I mean, if you believe this theory, then pretty much everyone in a position of power is either part of the conspiracy or complicit in covering it up.
Exactly. And that can be a really dangerous mindset because it erodes trust in all sorts of institutions that are essential for a functioning society. It makes it hard to have productive conversations, to find common ground, to
Yeah.
work together to solve problems.
So what can we do about it? I mean, how do we combat this kind of thinking, especially in an age where misinformation spreads so quickly and easily?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to foster critical thinking skills, to teach people how to evaluate information, how to spot misinformation, how to think for themselves.
Right, because it's not enough to just tell people what to believe. They need to be able to figure it out for themselves.
Exactly. And that involves being aware of our own biases, our own tendencies to jump to conclusions, to see patterns where there might not be any.
It's about being humble, about being willing to admit when we're wrong, about being open to changing our minds when presented with new evidence.
Exactly. And it's also about being compassionate, about understanding that people who believe in conspiracy theories, they're not necessarily stupid or crazy. They're often just trying to make sense of a world that feels increasingly complex and confusing.
So maybe the key is to have those conversations, to try to understand where people are coming from, to address their underlying fears and anxieties rather than just dismissing them outright.
I think so. It's not about winning arguments. It's about building bridges, about fostering understanding and empathy. And who knows, maybe in the process, we'll all learn something new about ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. That's a great note to end on. This deep dive into Project Bluebeam has been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've explored the theory itself, the supposed evidence, the psychology of belief, and even the dangers of misinformation. It's been a whirlwind of ideas, but hopefully it's left you with more questions than answers. Keep those skeptical minds engaged, deep divers, and remember, the truth is out there, but it's up to us to find it.